Hey everyone, welcome to season 2, episode 2 episode of Spiritual Healthcare from Supernatural Circumstances podcast. I'm Morgan Knudsen, and I'm glad you could join us on the spiritual healthcare for Dissecting the Amherst Mystery, The Haunting of Esther Cox. If you haven't listened to the full episode with our amazing guest, Lori Glenn Norris, and of course my co-host, Mike Brown, go to any podcast platform, Spotify, Apple, you name it, download and subscribe to Supernatural Circumstances, listen to the episode, and then come on back here for spiritual healthcare. So, that being said, this was a really interesting episode. And this one was, I think, took a turn that not many people are expecting when we really get into the guts of the Esther Cox story. Now, this is a Canadian case, and which you don't hear too much about in the parapsychology world. But apart from whether you believe this was psychokinetic activity, poltergeist activity, a haunting, or it was just plain fraud, whatever you believe, there's lessons to be had here that I think are worth dissecting, and a lot that can be learned from Esther Cox herself. Now, she's somebody, even though that she was, born in this little town that the majority of the world probably has no idea where it is. The interesting thing about this is that her case and her character, even though it's extreme, it's on the extreme end of the spectrum, is very relatable, in the sense that when you look back on Esther's history, there is a pattern here that we see of not only a motherless daughter, because her mother passed away not long after she gave birth, but also of a daddyless daughter. And this is really significant, and I think it's significant for all of us going through, and all of the women in the world that were daddyless daughters, whether their father passed away or they're, like in Esther's case, she watched her dad move away with another woman, having another family, and just left her to the sidelines. Whatever the case is, here you had a daddyless daughter who felt that she had no voice. And this is such a detrimental thing for anybody. It doesn't matter what era you've grown up in, whether it be, back in Esther's day, or whether you were born in the year 2000 or the year 1950 or it just doesn't matter. The dynamics are really the same. And here we see the impact of the daddyless daughter phenomenon all throughout Esther's life, and the repercussions of not understanding how having a voice and maintaining your brand, understanding your identity or your brand as a person, not as a business, not as an entertainer, as of course Esther ended up to be in a way. This is about understanding yourself and what you represent going forward. And what I noticed in Esther's story, which I found really interesting, was that the first exploitation that happened to her was not her alleged boyfriend Bob. It was the exploitation of her father, who allowed her to grow up watching him raise another family, and there was no interaction, there was no connection. And so there was this level right at the beginning of her life that said, men don't listen to me. If I get attention from men, it's crumbs, or it's rooted in either bending to their will, or whatever that may be. But the overall message very early on for Esther was that she was not worth it. Her voice was not worth it. And when you're not acknowledged at that very early age, you tend to lose your voice. And that continued to manifest for Esther throughout her life, whether it be with the boyfriend who we can allege was perhaps abusive to her. Either way, that just really crumbled and fell apart in a pretty horrible way. And then of course in walks this author who is, verbally looking to make money from her, but here she's getting, again, attention from this guy who is giving her what seems to be like an opportunity, but again, it's exploiting, her identity and wanting to be acknowledged. So we see this throughout her life, and the spiral that ensues because of it. And I think this is something that so many people, especially women and girls, can relate to, that have had a similar upbringing. And no, you probably didn't end up on stage, having somebody lecture at you, waiting for, explosions of entertainment and psychokinetic activity to happen around you. You probably didn't have people sitting in your home, waiting for paranormal activity to start happening, or, any of that was going on. But I think her story is understandable. And the takeaway from me, from the Esther Cox story, apart from the paranormal side of it, is how important it is that we remain in charge of our brand. See, everybody has a brand, and we like to think about brands as businesses, but we as individuals, when we walk through the world, each have a brand. And when we allow somebody else to begin to define and package the brand, then whether it be a business, whether it be a dream, or whether it just be you're the product, you are the product, then if we lose our voice in that, it can have a ripple effect in our lives. And one of the symptoms of, and this really is one of the symptoms of not healing the wounds early on of whatever was going on with the family, whether you lost a parent, or went through a terrible divorce as a kid, or whatever that is being able to find yourself again and find that level of self-worth, so that when the Walter Hubbells of the world step into our lives and say, I'm going to change what you are to the world, then you can have enough of a voice, enough strength to put your hand up and say, no, thank you. No, thank you. Predators find people who don't have a voice. And if you don't have one, somebody somewhere that's looking for that person to exploit, or that person to manipulate, will give you one. And I think that is the takeaway from this for me. So I challenge everybody watching to assess your voice, assess your brand. Who are you? Who are you going out into the world? Who are you when you put yourself out there? Are you leaning into the branding of the people outside of you? Or have you defined yourself clearly enough that if somebody comes in and says, I'm going to remake who you are, you can turn around and say, no, thank you. I'm good. Anyway, everybody, that's this episode of Spiritual Healthcare. Hope you really enjoyed the season 2 episode, second episode of Supernatural Circumstances with myself, Morgan Knudsen, and Mike Brown. Again, you guys can download it anywhere you podcast. Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio. We're even on Audible. Who knew? And we're really looking forward to the next upcoming episode. So if you've had this experience, or you want to talk about your experience, don't forget to join Supernatural Circumstances after the show. That's our Facebook group. You can come in, tell your story, and maybe add how this has impacted you, because I think everybody has a story or knows somebody that can relate to this. So looking forward to hearing everybody's comments. And until next time, everyone, stay curious, friends.